Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming back at you with another Wargaming and Miniatures video. In this video, we're going to be continuing our bolt action boot camp. We're going to be talking about close combat, or close quarters combat. Alright, so now if you want to issue a close quarters or an assault order against your opponent, you need to issue your troops a run order. You declare your target, you measure the move distance, the target reacts, and then you move assaulting models, and then you fight the first round of close combat, and then you resolve draws. All right, so you declare once you issue like a run order to a unit. You say, hey, I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to close assault these guys. So in this situation, we're just going to say, I'm going to give these guys a run order and I'm going to close assault these guys. And that's what I would tell my opponents. So you have to be able to see the enemy unit, or you have to see the building it occupies. Just like you select one unit to shoot at, it's very similar to assaults. You have to select one unit to assault. Measure the distance between the units, less than 12 inches. And remember, this means you're measuring from the closest model to the closest model. So if my unit was like this, see if I can scoot these back some, and he alone is within 12 inches, it's okay. These guys don't necessarily have to be within 12 inches. Remember, when you're measuring between units, you measure from the closest model to the closest model. Alright, now when measuring the distance, yes, he's within 12 inches, but when you move, you have to be able to move around an obstacle, because if you go over an obstacle, you're limited to only 6 inches of movement. Even though it is still considered a run, you can only go 6 inches if there's an obstacle in the way. If there's not an obstacle in the way, and you measure that 12 inches and it gets to the enemy without crossing an obstacle, then you are in range. If, for whatever reason, you declare that you're going to assault the unit and the range from the closest model to the closest model is greater than 12 inches, then you still move the models 12 inches. They just don't make it into close combat. Now, if the assault would be successful, I'm going to put these guys back where they were. If this assault would be successful, then these guys have the option to react. If it would not be successful, because there would not be any close combat, they would just run up to 12 inches and stop. The target does not get to react. You only get to react if the assault would have made it all the way into contact. To react, you're able to fire against the assaulters. Basically, you pull an order die and you put fire on your guys. Basically, you get to preempt your turn and you get to jump to the fire order. And sometimes that fire might be enough to wipe these guys out and prevent that close combat. It'll kill a few guys, so when they get into close combat, they'll be less effective. If you have one or more pin markers, when you're being assaulted, you can automatically shoot back without having to make an order roll or order test. Okay, shooting happens immediately before these models are actually moved. Even if they're out of range, your weapon still gets to shoot because it's assumed that they're shooting as they get in range. Any weapon that is out of range still gets to shoot, but it uses the long range modifier. It's assumed that they're waiting for them to get into range. If the assaulting unit is less than 6 inches away, they're at point blank range, it's considered a surprise charge, and they do not get to react to this charge. If, for whatever reason, this unit was already on an ambush order, they can still fire just like any other movement in their front. If it is a fixed firing weapon and they're being charged or close assaulted, they can only fire if the charge comes from their arc of fire. If they are to the side and they charge, they cannot pivot and shoot. When you measure the range, if you're in range, either the 6 or 12 inches, depending on if you're going over an obstacle or not. If you are within range, it's considered a successful charge. They take their shots, they do their damage. Then you move assaulting models. Position your troops so that as many of your troops can touch as many of their troops as possible. You don't leave anybody out unless you have to, like you have less figures than they do. But you just run in and you go base to base. Okay, so let's say I had exactly that many and the Germans had one extra guy, right? That didn't get a chance to get base to base. Well, at that point, he would move up and he would get base to base. He would join. You move everybody into contact with someone, friend or foe. So it's kind of like a little micro counter charge, or as close as possible. So, you know, like if it was so tight that this guy couldn't fit, you would just scooch him up a little bit until he gets as close as possible. And they count as fighting even though they're not base to base. Because, you know, guys are like throwing grenades, and it's a swirl in combat. They're not actually fixed exactly in their little 1-inch base circle that they're standing. Note that individual models could potentially move further than 12 inches to reach the enemy. Remember, so like if I had a line of guys going this way, and this guy's like 2 feet away, and this guy was 12 inches away, and I assaulted, this guy would move all the way up, you know, because basically you just don't even bother measuring. You just move them up into base to base. So yes, potentially a guy could move super far. Remember, there is that 1-inch rule gap. That 1-inch rule is temporarily ignored for close assaults. When you're assaulting a defended obstacle, it's slightly different. Okay, so when you're assaulting a defended obstacle, we'll get back to it. There you go. All right, so you're measuring your 12 inches. As long as they're within 12 inches, it's fine. You do not consider that as an obstacle of your movement. When you move up, you just move up into base-to-base contact with that obstacle, right? So you just go right on up in there. All right, so when you are assaulting, normally the attacker assaults first, and then the defender replies with his jabs with his bayonet, right? So you got your bayonets, grenades, pistol shots. Close quarters combat happens by the attacker, and then whoever survives from the defender does their defense. It's a great way to kill a lot of models. If, for whatever reason, you had to cross an obstacle to get to them, when you cross an obstacle, it shortens your move to 6 inches, they still would make it. But now, because you crossed an obstacle, or if they were defending an obstacle, an obstacle or rough ground, anything that would slow you to 6 inches, let me back that up. Or if they're defending an obstacle and you're charging them, even though you have your 12-inch move, you either had to go over an obstacle, they're defending an obstacle, or you're traveling across rough ground that reduces your movement to 6 inches. In that case, combat is simultaneous. So both sides attack at the same time. All right, let's just say that there was no wall and they close assaulted, and that was the result. The first round of close quarters, the attackers roll damage. You notice I didn't say to hit. They just roll straight up on the damage roll. You could do exceptional damage. You can do regular damage, right? So just like you normally would. Now everybody gets 1 die. That's because everybody's got 1 bayonet, everybody's got 1 grenade, or whatever. You don't roll your rate of fire. That's not what you're rolling. You're not rolling your BAR, or you're not rolling your Thompson. You're not rolling none of that. You're just rolling 1 die per man, and you're looking for a kill. Some weapons have the ability called assault. And now, I didn't go over this in the previous video when I was talking about weapon abilities, and I should have. That was my bad. Some weapons have this ability called assault. And not only does it give you, you don't get a -1 when moving and shooting, but when you're in melee or in close assaults, if you score a kill, you get to roll again to see if you can get a second kill. So this guy with his submachine gun has an assault weapon, which basically means that he is a tough fighter. That's an ability of some units and anybody carrying a weapon with assault. So in close quarters, when you're equipped with this type of a weapon, or if you're trained like a commando or the Gurkhas, if you score casualty in close quarters, then against infantry or artillery, then you can immediately make a second roll, just not a third. Okay, so the attacker rolls for casualties, and there's no modifiers or no weapon special rules other than the assault special weapon. And that assault allows him to be a tough fighter, and the tough fighter allows him to roll additional kills if you have any kills. Okay, and then once the casualties are created by the assaulters, and remember, pins have no effect, or you ignore the pin rules in close combat. And then the defender, whoever is alive, retaliates, and they roll their casualties. And again, you have exceptional damage as well. Like if you roll any 6s, roll again to see if you get an additional 6. And if you don't, then the defender or the target picks the casualty he's going to take. Okay, so now you just count the number of casualties on each side, and whoever lost the more, the entire unit is destroyed. If there are gaps now in the unit after killing off your entire enemy opponent, then all you have to do is do a little regroup move and reconsolidate, basically, and you are given a 1-inch opportunity to move like that. If it's a draw, like both sides lose 2 guys, then it's a tie, and you go into a second round of combat, and the second round is considered simultaneous, and you continue going into rounds of combat until one side wins and the other side loses. Oh, I misspoke. The winner regroups, and he rolls a d6, and that's how many inches he can consolidate his troops. Alright, so let's go through a close quarters combat from start to finish. We're going to set it up. These are the Americans. There's one guy with a Thompson. The rest all have rifles. There's a group of Germans over here with a light machine gun, a submachine gun, and 2 submachine guns and 2 rifles. Well, he's considered a rifleman as well. But they've already been given a fire order. They shot at a unit over here, maybe the tank or who knows what, and we drew a green die out. We declare a run. We're going to charge these guys. We nominated that we're going to charge these guys. We measure the range. We are within 12 inches. They have already fired, so they cannot react. So because they're within 12 inches, we go ahead and move them up to get within base-to-base contact with these crazy individuals. Boom. Didn't even have to measure, just ran them up. Okay, and then since they didn't get an opportunity to react, and they're not behind any kind of defensive obstacle, the assaulting models, the attacker gets to roll first. So let's roll. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, super easy. 5. Because these guys are regulars, we're looking for 4s or better to hit. We roll some dice. Oh man, look at all that. That doesn't count. You know why? Because one of them is a tough fighter, and I needed to roll him separately because if he gets a kill, he gets to roll again. Darn. See? He did not get a kill, so he doesn't get to roll again, but 3 other guys are killed. The receiving target decides he's going to kill a rifleman. 1, 2, 3. He kills his 3 riflemen. Now he gets to fight back. He's got 2 submachine guns, so we're going to count these as the tough fighters, and we're going to count this as the machine gunner. And because you're fighting back against, we'll call them regulars, you need 4s or better. Okay, so the tough fighters, one of them got a kill, and the machine gunner got a kill. So Not just that, the tough fighter might have also got an exceptional kill. So let's see if it was exceptional. It was not. Let's see if he gets a second kill. He does not. So he kills, I kill 2 guys. I'm going to take these 2 riflemen. Now because the paratroopers killed 3 and the Germans killed 2, the Germans are wiped out. So all these guys are dead. This goes back in to my opponent. These guys are dead. And then I roll a d6. I can move up to 5 inches and consolidate my guys behind whatever cover or whatever. So they, they cruise on over here and take some cover. Notice how no one got any pins. Okay, now on the regrouping move, you cannot enter a building or exit the battlefield or mount transports or anything like that with that special move. It's supposed to be just for them occupying the terrain that was being held by your opponent. Now, entering a building is a different story, and that's explained in the building rules, which we'll talk about in a future video. Alright, well thanks for coming out and checking out this video, and the next video we're going to be talking about headquarters, special units like artillery observers, and we're going to talk about special unit rules, very much like the Tough Fighters rule we just talked about, and I'll see you then.